Greetings. I'm Michael Quinn Patton. I've been a professional evaluator for more than 5 decades, and in the books I've written about evaluation and the videos I make, I track new and emergent forms of evaluation. This video is a conversation about generative evaluation with Malika Veerasamy. After an early career as a field conservationist working on threatened species and ecosystem management, she became increasingly committed to addressing broader issues of sustainability. During the last several years, she's been working with local communities, businesses, NGOs, government, and research organizations to find solutions for building socio-ecological sustainability in various sectors, with a focus on production practices relying on natural resources. Her research concerns the agriculture, energy, environment nexus. Her work is involved in improving sustainability standards, establishing deforestation-free supply chains, defining low-carbon pathways for urban development, enabling equitable green growth, and responsible mining. She worked for many years in conservation and agricultural programs in Madagascar, Congo, and several Indian Ocean islands. This is our conversation, then, that took place over several sessions about generative evaluation and its relationship to an approach that I've worked with, developmental evaluation. Here is our conversation. So tell me about the purpose and the dreams.
Beautiful. So the purpose and the dreams in generative evaluation is to keep on looking at the interconnectedness between what's emerging as purpose, how is design supporting purpose or going against purpose, what's happening in a set of relationships, and is it moving towards the purpose that they thought at the beginning, or is it moving towards something else? And then is the design helping the relationships, or is it not? What we try to do is, what kind of frame do we need to look at emergence? We try to look at emergence in the interconnectedness between these three. We call it the triangle, which I'm going to show in a minute. The triangle. So a little bit what I've just said. And I'm going to tell some stories, some real case example to talk about this interconnectedness. So we were working with a large global partnership, trying to transform supply chain. So make it more, reducing deforestation, improving standards. So a beautiful purpose, you can say. In many countries in the world, we were doing a generative evaluation and learning with a huge partnership. And the purpose was very beautiful, but it was highly complex because it's very difficult to you have the producers, the traders, and the processors, and then the supermarket. So it's a super complex settings to actually to change things. And because as we engage in the project, we realized that the purpose, because they didn't know how to it was not clear how to go about to do it. They had theory of change, but obviously it was not working so well. The purpose that emerged is that actually the purpose should be social innovation and experimentation, because we really don't know how to do it, because it's very complex to go with the status quo right now. But because the purpose, it was very difficult for them to change the purpose. The purpose was grand. That's what the donor wanted. That's usually what large institutions like to say, that we're going to reduce deforestation, that we're going to. They were trapped in a purpose, although underneath, as we brought about systems change practice, it was obvious that the system, social experimentation would have really supported, was really emerging as purpose. So in generative evaluation, we try to see what is a purpose, but what's other purposes emerging that is they don't emerge out of context. They emerge because the context is so. So that's really important. And then in another case study, again we work with big donors. They really wanted all of the agencies that were benefiting from the money to learn. Of course, that's a beautiful purpose, to learn. And yet the design of how the evaluation approaches are was not inducing learning. So the design was not supporting purpose. And instead of seeing it as a failure of projects, it actually was just the design was allowing a different purpose, was much more focused on accountability, compliance, but was not purpose. So if purpose was really a learning, if they needed to revisit what was the design that would support them, what's the design of evaluation that supports this kind of this outcome. And then another case study that we had was relationships. Most evaluation often are done in international development. There is always a set of relationships, between global South and global North, and these relationships, there are many things, different values, different power structures, different hierarchies, different mental models, assumptions. And what we were the set of relationships really wanted to work with farmers, again, for supporting them. But the power relations, or the way they were, the way one relationship thought about the other relationships, very classic, that we're not helping the purpose. So again, it's like, what's the relationship? Is the relationship supporting the design? Is it design? And in this design, they needed to reduce polarization. So it needed a set of relationships that was a design that would support this relationship. So this is how we look at emergence. We look at, so what the systemic issues come out when we look at what's emerging, or the potential comes out. So what I wanted to share is that what is apparent is not working, is not a flaw, but something that we work with to see what's in. Why does it deviate? There's very good reason it deviates from what you wanted. So it's very much what you, Michael, have been doing in emergence, in looking at emergence, but we just put this interconnectedness to help people see where do they deviate in this kind of frame.
Tell me about the language of living system.
Yes. Oh, beautiful. So from my experience, especially when I did a training with Nora Bateson, which was really, really enlightening. I realized the way that we approach systems change, we're still thinking in parts and in mechanism. And I started to think through the rich work that she'd done, I really realized that what we're working is a living system, and it's an organism. And the organism, when an organism does something, it does something for very good reason. It doesn't do something because it wants to fail, or it wants. So the language of living system is to look at an organism not as a robot that is supposed to do something, has agreed for a purpose and then delivers it, but rather it's a living system having very good reasons why it does certain things, and to work with what it does and to see why does it do that? How come? Is there anything else wanting to be nourished, fertilized, transformed? So really seeing projects, program, organization not as a machine you plug in and you plug out things, but to see that it is an organism. It does things for very good reason.
What comes up for me for developmental evaluation is that we look at what the baseline situation is, what the initial conditions are, where any of these things and other things gets described as the baseline situation. So what are the baseline relationships, who's in relationship to whom, what do people perceive the current system to be, and the issues of purpose, both existing purpose and what people hope will change. All of that is the baseline. And then they typically begin with some design in mind and some purpose in mind and some way of working together in mind, to use the triangle. But that as that work starts, what emerges are different and conflicting and new opportunities, so that the purpose is dynamic, the design is dynamic, the relationships are dynamic, the larger world impinges, and that it's a um, it's a dynamic, moving set of relationships and purposes, ongoing design, recreating the design that is emerging um, contextually at any given time, uh, and that whatever people are facing in a particular problem or in a bigger picture strategic way, that these things come into play, but they're never fixed. They're always dynamic.
Good.
And so emergence is that ongoing set of interactions using your triangle between purpose, design, and relationships that is constantly in motion.
Yep.
And so the developmental evaluation is tracking those interactions, um, changing roles, changing problems, changing context, and seeing how people are making sense of it at any given time as they make decisions. The the role of the evaluator in this um, is to elucidate each of these things, so that people who are doing programs um, are often not very reflective or not very skilled at being able to describe these things. That needs some facilitation, which I presume is also what you do. You get people through interviews, through mapping, through interactions, to depict what they think the system is, what they think the purpose and what relationships they want, and that very engagement begins to change everything, so that the questions that we ask and the descriptions that come forth, the pictures that people paint, the maps that they do, becomes part of the intervention um, as that journey unfolds. And so in documenting it, what we're partly looking for developmentally are where this constellation of things goes through a major shift, where people realize they've moved from one place to another place. And that's made up of changed relationships, changed design elements, um, a refinement of purpose, uh, often more than one purpose, um, and increasingly um, we're working with thinking of not a system. That's why I asked a question about the living system, but a set of interacting systems, a cluster of systems. And that, so there's the ecological environment system, there's the human cultural system, political system, the economic system, and organizational systems. And so they each, um, those things also are emergent. Their relationships are emergent and interacting. Uh, and so the way in which those systems interact around these elements is what the developmental evaluation is capturing. In any given moment, the political system may be primary, the cultural system, the organizational system, the environmental system, but they're always in a holistic way interacting together. And as people understand those interconnections, that's part of the emergence.
Yeah, no, beautiful to hear you describe it, Michael. I think completely agree with you. It's those interconnectedness that we are trying to map out, rather trying to map out. One thing I wanted to say is, you mentioned that it's nested systems that you're looking at. How I've been thinking about things is also, it all starts with the set of relationships and interactions we map out. So instead of saying we're going to evaluate in a particular system, we look at what are the relationships you're bringing forward for us to explore. And then through those set of relationships, things will be missing, and maybe we always ask what's missing, and what relationships are brought forward and what interactions emerge as apparent, defines what system we're building. So it's the emergence from a set of relationships and what we are exploring that defines the system we're looking for. So we never start saying, okay, we're looking at an organization, because our experience, I should share an experience where we were working with a large donor that was giving large agencies money, and they said, no, the objective is not to look at our evaluation system, but at the evaluation system of the other, and don't look at us, because we know, because the problem is there. And so when we started set up relationship, we said, okay, that if that's the contract, we'll adhere to it. But things emerged that had to do, of course, with the donor sorts of rules and structures and design. So we didn't define the system, but what emerged from the set of relationship determined what we are looking at. Another thing that I wanted, so that's the living systems, because it's not for the facilitators to define what system we're looking at.
And we both use the questions about relationships as a way of depicting the system. And I look at, in that questioning, not just the relationships of people with each other, the interpersonal relationships, but actually the way in which they think about their relating to these other systems. So asking people how they relate to the political system, or to the cultural system, or to the financial system, or the political system. I was with a group a week ago, and they said that they view their relationship as evaluators with the political system as neutral, that they don't engage with it. But as we dug deep into how they make decisions, it was clear that that wasn't the case, that they were ignoring power by simply saying we're neutral. And that allowed them to not deal with power. But clearly power was in everything that they did. Or asking about, what's your relationship with knowledge? Where's your information come from? What do you know? Where does your knowledge base come from? And so relationships for me is a set of questions rather than a thing. And the answers become the ways in which people are able to understand what journey they're on.
Beautiful. It's the questions also that matter, rather than saying a set of relationship or the connection or the mindsets. I love it. One way we also work, Michael, is we ask questions, but we work with a lot of what we call intuitive or systemic method. So systemic method might be embodiment, constellations. For example, one approach that I really love is to each person, is invited to embody a stakeholders, and then they see how they want to position themselves to other stakeholders and what comes up. Often power comes up. Actually, the method is called body mapping. It comes from the from the Presencing Institute, and it actually works with power because the most powerful actor enters the space first to the least, what we think the least. But then we see how it plays out, who wants to come close to what, who's doing what. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that instead of asking direct questions, we work with the body and the intuition and to kind of allow things that are often, you mentioned, like that people think that they are neutral to the political systems, to allow this to emerge. The same thing.
How would that turn up a situation where there's a person in positional power who thinks that they're the power, but it turns out there's somebody else who's actually at the center of the information system who's the real connector, but that doesn't get officially named. So how would that come out when you're facilitating that?
Actually, that was very interesting. At the last COP21, we did one around countries, and it actually was COP21 in Scotland. So the UK was hosting the COP, and so we did a consultation around the countries, and it was very clear that although they were the hosting organization and all the power seemed to be that they are at the center of attention, it was actually other countries that were at the center of attention. It's in the constellation is really about embodiment. You go with how you feel. So things that unusual things emerge. I remember another constellation where all the theory of change was that traders can change the supply chain because they are the one who deal with the farmers and they are the one who sells to retailers. But when you look at the constellation, the traders said, we are not at the center of attention. We actually have to do everything that farmers want us to do. And then we have to do everything that retailers want us to do. We actually squish between the two. And that was really the theory of change for all the environmental NGOs was to work with traders. But that made it apparent that another reality is that it's not what's apparent. And of course, there are other realities. I'm not saying that's the only truth. In that moment, as you mentioned, like as you work in that set of time, because things are dynamic, this is what's emerging. I think the question of power is a very interesting one, and it's often in evaluation, it hasn't been explored enough.
Power is a hard thing to talk about, hard thing for people to get real about and understand our own patterns of.
Yeah, no, I think you make a good point. I think when we talk about purpose, it's a set of relationships that have a certain purpose. I mean, usually when we're doing an evaluation, it's usually there was a group intending with a purpose. Like we wouldn't do evaluations on a group of people that haven't come that never had a common purpose together. So I agree with you that a system itself, if you map a system, that this neighborhood here, the purpose is emergence based on the interactions. In the context of the evaluation, it's always the people that come together have had something to do together that's around purpose. But I've been thinking about that. How would we do if we wanted to evaluate something that never came around with a purpose, let's say a neighborhood, an urban neighborhood? How would we do an evaluation in a context where there was no purpose? But I'm sure there is a purpose because that's in the interactions, can only be observed in the interactions, like the interactions, the design, how the design, that is what forms the purpose.
That's where we get into the overlapping system. So a neighborhood is going to have housing, it's going to have economics, it's going to have political and cultural and interpersonal and gender and age. And so the combination of those things is the living system overall, but there's not a single purpose. There's interactive kinds of purposes at different layers. And part of the issue generatively, it seems to me, is how much they're aligned, where they're aligned, where their commonalities, where the conflicts are, where people can find some common purpose across those things. But that common purpose is always going to be fragile, and is going to be temporary as conditions change and people test it out. The language of evaluation tends to be very static, of thinking you start at one place and then you get to a new place and that new place just continues. But the whole thinking of developmental evaluation is it's all dynamic all the time.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think often one of the limiting factor to think as living system is that we always do an evaluation in a context, in a very framed context, where there was a certain purpose given to a certain set of relationships. So that has led to us thinking that I think thinking more like a machine, allowing less emergence. But let's say you are looking at a neighborhood, this is where you would have to do exactly what you mentioned. You'll have to look at the economic context, at the political context, at the cultural context, at education, at business settings, and say, okay, what are the set of interactions that emerge that allow this design to this urban design right now? And so it allows you, I think, to set into the mind frame of a living systems. Whereas when you do evaluation in a more box context with a purpose, I think you treat unconsciously it like less like a living system.
We're demonstrating that we're not in control at all of our own behaviors.
Yes. Yes, and the irony is that when we want to do good things, we use the paradigm of control. And I think it's like the humility to know that we're not in control. It's all about living systems that we're, like humans are not in control.
Is the language of design. That's control language. And
Yeah.
so a generative design or developmental design, an adjective that mitigates a little bit the command and control traditional notion. Even human-centered design strikes me as a very poor and arrogant way to talk about. It feeds the command and control.
Yeah.
That human-centered design puts humans at the center, and that's not a dynamic world that includes the environment, the ecosystem, and other people. So we're playing around with the language of evaluation, but the language of design really carries a lot of colonial and military industrial connotations that I think are worth exploring. That's why I like your language of generativity. Generativity is more dynamic and interactive. Design carries a very command and control kind of connotation.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think it would be work for me also to you pose me a question that I haven't really thought about what's design and to think about in living systems. Like there is interactions. That's what makes a design. That leads to this design.
And so part of the implication for me of a developmental generative design, when I work with folks, especially in new programs, I work with them about what their values are, what their vision is, why they're doing the work, sort of the purpose stuff, and then what the baseline is, and then and then suggest that they only do their action for the first 3 months, that they not do a full implementation plan, that they not look beyond 3 months, because the way in a generative developmental design, what you learn is by engaging the system. And so to think you're going to lay out a 5-year plan or a 3-year plan or even a 1-year plan means you have blinders on and you miss a lot of what's actually going to happen when you start to work. So what are the first things you're going to do? Get in and start doing the work, and let's reflect on it and have an iterative, emergent, ongoing developmental generative design rather than a fixed design.
I love it. I mean, I've been reading your book, and like where you talk about how social innovators are. I think we can't experiment when we have this 5-year plan. We stop experimenting because, yeah, we can
All
explore.
implementation, it's not experimentation, right?
Yeah. And I think somebody described, I think Lynn Margulis or one of these famous biologists, that nature just tinkers. That's what it does. It's experimenting all the time. There is no design, there's just experimentation.